Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people they may gather in one place, this meeting of the Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee will be conducted as a hybrid meeting, in person and virtual. Attendance at the in-person meeting will be limited to Berkshire Hills Regional School District School Committee members, superintendent, and business administrator. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this time, but may access the meeting remotely through Zoom and or Facebook. Agenda items listed are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. This meeting is being recorded by CTSB and will be broadcast. Meeting is also being recorded by the committee recorder, other members of the committee, and members of the audience. Minutes will be transcribed and made public and posted to our website once approved. So the first thing I want to do is take attendance in this new format. So let's go through. Molly.
Here.
Sounds like Psycho.
Jason, here. Didn't happen when I went through.
I think it's because they're unmuted and you're unmuted at the same time.
Okay.
Maybe we should stay muted?
Yeah, stay muted. Okay. Stay muted. I can hear you, obviously. Sean. I don't see Sean on the call. Diane?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Andy Potter. Ann Hutchinson.
Aye.
Bill Fields.
Here?
Rich Mahoney.
Here.
And obviously here. So if I'm correct, Sean and Andy are the two that are not on the at this point. So let's start with the minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes in our packet. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Jason and a second by Molly. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
No.
So it's a roll call vote. Molly.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Diane.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Ann.
Aye.
Bill.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
And I, so it's unanimous. Then we'll turn it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Okay, good. Sorry.
It's the Alfred Hitchcock hour.
Okay, we're working out the kinks of doing a hybrid meeting. So I got 2 things. School's starting face-to-face on Monday, and we're very excited about that. Folks have been working hard, teachers, paras, principals, assistants, principals, and custodians in particular. So that should be good. A slight shift that's going to happen at Muddy Brook. The arrival and dismissal are each going to be 5 minutes later there. That gives us a little more flexibility with busing. And connected to that, the pre-K hours are going to shift a little bit, and they're going to be at from 9:10 to 2:10. We'll put that out. Okay. So sorry. That's really where we're at. Lots of hard work from people, and it's much appreciated. What we'd like to do now, Ben put together a very detailed and thoughtful plan around the hybrid learning model, and I'd like to give Ben some time to talk through it. It's many, many pages, and it's complex. It's, I think, really good work. And it's a starting point, and things will continue to evolve from there. So, Ben, to try to avoid some feedback, I'm going to mute myself and let you talk through it.
Great, and my apologies. I'm having some issues with my computer. I'm on my phone. Are you able to hear me and see me? Can you give me a thumbs up or something? Great, thank you, Peter. So it's basically an overview of what we both discussed last week in the school committee meeting, and then also what I was able to discuss in my parent forum last Wednesday. I took the feedback from the school committee. I appreciated the discussion and was able to put together a much clearer explanation, I think, with a lot more detail, and as well work out some of the speculation about what we would do if we were in hybrid, if we went longer than 2 weeks. So it's just basically broken down. It discusses a little bit about our values. It discusses a little bit about the way we are approaching the hybrid model, and then gives an explanation or a visual of what the schedule would look like, and then some schedules of what it would look like if we went longer than several weeks, and then talks a little bit more about what we would do in the long run if we really felt that the hybrid model wasn't working. So just do a quick overview. The values, as I discussed last week, and I talked about this at my parent forum, family forum last night, really strong is the idea of deeper learning and compelling curriculum, which I'm really proud of our staff, our teachers in particular, for doing, but a lot of support from our paraprofessionals. And then these ideas behind crew culture and students as leaders of their own learning, getting students to really be empowered to not only be independent, but to be able to do work both together and on their own. And then lastly, empowering leadership, empowering our teachers, our teams, and also our students to take responsibility for the learning community. So then the hybrid model was pretty straightforward. It was the idea that we have a maximizing face-to-face time, so that those 2 in-person days are very much about students being in classes and getting in very small groups. 10, 11, 12 is our largest. We have some groupings of 8 or 9, but most of them are about 10, 11, 12 students. But that's a very small amount of students for a 45-minute period, allowing us to have some really strong focus, really accelerate learning, getting students ready. And then the idea is they go through their 6 learning experiences: English, math, science, social studies, and then a mix of either foreign language or their exploratories or academic support or special education services or ESL. And going through those 6 experiences along with crew during those 2 synchronous in-person days, and then having synchronous crew connections at the beginning of hybrid on Wednesday, as well as the 2 days, Thursday and Friday mornings and afternoons. But then for a chunk of the day on Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and the time on Thursday and Friday sandwiched in, where students would be working asynchronously. There are other middle school models which mix that synchronous and asynchronous across the 4 or 5 days, meaning a student would come in to an in-person day, have some time with a synchronous teacher in a classroom face-to-face, but then half the day would be independent work. And then we would move the synchronous time, let's say, to the off days when students are home, where there would be face-to-face on the computer. But what we're trying to really maximize is the face-to-face time in this model. And as well, we're also trying to minimize the total amount of screen time. What we know about younger students, but I think this is true and includes students who are even 13 and 14-year-olds and even older, the amount of screen time that a child is on the computer is 6 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week is not healthy, both just from a larger intellectual sense, but also from an emotional and developmental sense. So the idea is to really maximize the in-person time and then teaching students how to do their work during the school day. There's a lot of crew check-ins. So that was what I had discussed, but the feedback I got was, well, what do we do if we go longer? Isn't this a lot of crew? Didn't we do a lot of crew in distance? And the answer is yes. I think it set us up for really strong relationships with the kids. And it's not just relationships that are important, but it's the academic connections and the academic oversight that a crew leader who's shepherding just 11 or 12 kids through a school year. But we've set that up in distance, and we just need to set it up in the transition to hybrid. It's not easy. And then if we're going in hybrid for, more than 2 weeks or so, we really would want to, and the teachers are starting to really have a strong interest in maximizing the connections with academic time, So one of the moves we're looking to make would be to move some of that crew time or the crew time on Thursday and Friday to check-ins and direct engagement with their core teachers, English, math, science, social studies, and the other teachers that I mentioned. And then if we were to move back into remote learning, if we had to, because it wasn't safe to be in school, we would also then start to have a more regular schedule across the grades of 2 or 4 times a week of academic engagements instead of the one, and also transferring a chunk of those crew minutes to academic periods, because we've already been in distance, we've already making the transition would be quick, and we would know how to do it. So the document really just explains what hybrid is for us in the next couple of weeks, and then speculates about what some of the shifts we would make if we were going to be in it for a longer period of time.
Do folks on the school committee have questions or things they're wondering about in this more articulated plan?
I'm on mute though, so.
Okay.
Ben, thanks a lot for the written explanation. It clarified a lot for me. I think you mentioned earlier, and I kind of agree with, I know this is what we're starting with. If hybrid becomes a long-term thing, which I don't believe it will be and hope it's not, I think that we can discuss, I'm sure you'll have adjustments for us that we can talk about. The one thing I think that has come out of this, though, in my thoughts that I didn't share last week, is whatever it was 15 years ago when they changed the middle school from a 7th and 8th grade to a 5th through 8th grade, I was one of the people who was skeptical and have been totally won over. I think it's a great model. I've had, 2 of my kids go through there and one's still there, and I think it's never had an issue with that. But I do wonder in this hybrid and remote learning context about how much we can really be treating 5th and 6th graders the same way we treat 7th and 8th graders. So I know you are keeping an eye on that, but if we have to stay in this long term, as you much said it, I think a lot of the time on the screen is far more detrimental for 5th and 6th graders than it is for 7th and 8th graders. So I think if we evolve through this, we may have to tailor it more towards grades. That's my one thing.
Thank you, Rich, and I appreciate that. And the teachers are already starting to make those moves. I think I really want to appreciate the hard work that went into planning and just thinking about building a model and then working within it. And I do know that the 5th and 6th grade teachers are starting to make moves that they can right now, but also thinking about what more long-term would be and how they would really look at that upper elementary. And then the 7th and 8th grade teachers, I think, are clamoring for some more rigor around the academics in that way. So I think that as people get more comfortable with working within distance and hybrid, we'll see the teachers really pushing for some of the things you're talking about.
Are there other questions from the school committee?
Okay, so let's entertain a motion.
What are we doing?
Motion to accept this plan.
I'll make a motion to accept this plan.
Second.
So I have a motion by Jason, a second by Rich. Any other discussion? And it's a roll call vote, as in all votes. Molly?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Ann? Bill?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And yes, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. And I also want to say I regret any miscommunication or misrepresentation, and I'm looking forward to being clear in the future. So thank you.
Okay, moving ahead. Subcommittee reports. Policy has not met. Jason, buildings and grounds.
We have not met.
Superintendent's evaluation has not met. Technology has not met. Finance, we just met. Rich, do you want to?
We did just meet and cover the 2 real high level overviews. One where we're at for FY21 and really starting our planning for next year. Sharon was able to share some updates in terms of potential savings around busing and some other matters, but there's no real clear numbers on that. I guess, tell me if I'm wrong, but at this point, COVID hasn't affected us dramatically one way or the other, but it's very much a wait and see thing for this fiscal year, like everything else. But we did decide on what we think is a pretty aggressive budget planning for FY22, which would put us on track to meet our regular deadline of being able to present a budget to the full school committee by that last meeting in December. As usual, usually by this time we're almost through all of the different presentations from the various departments and are into actually analyzing numbers, and we're just starting that now. So we're going to meet through then and hope to get that with the idea that usually in January we kind of wait and see where the governor's numbers come out with, and there's a little bit tweaking. We think we'll have a budget in December. We'll review it with the full committee, and then once the governor's numbers come out, there may be a real intense rewriting, replanning, reallocating of it. So we're expecting not only an aggressive couple months here to get something to you guys for December, but more importantly, probably more intense budget session than we had before. So that's where we're at. And anybody's projections as to what the state numbers are going to look like for next year are if anybody says they think they know, they don't. So we're just going to see how it goes.
Does anyone have any questions of Rich? Okay, moving ahead, Sharon, business operations, warrant report, and FY20 fourth quarter transfer overview and detail report.
Excuse me, yes, the warrant report you have in front of you is because during COVID, we had just one person come in to sign the warrant. So when that occurs, it's a requirement that we send a report to the school committee for your review. And don't know if there would be any questions because it's just pretty straightforward. It's pretty much, it's our typical payroll, accounts payable.
Motion to approve.
That kind of thing.
Seconded.
Okay, so I have a motion by Rich, a second by Bill. Any discussion? Roll call, Molly.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Diane.
Aye.
Ann. Bill.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
And yes, it's unanimous. Sharon, go on to the transfer.
The fourth quarter transfer report. This is a little later than we like to get transfer reports. The thing is, while we're closing out the end of the year, which happens into September, we still have transfers. The items 1, 2, 3, and 4 are sort of typical operating year, operating budget changes for additional supplies or tax materials that weren't anticipated at the beginning of the year. As you see with number 5, at the beginning of the COVID closure, we froze the budget because we weren't sure what was going to happen, if we needed additional funding. And so we closed the budget. When we got closer and we looked at where our bottom line was, and not knowing what the state budget is and what was going to be happening, we requested that the principals look at some of their highest needs purchases for this year and released funds to them. I apologize that the accounts that they were moved from didn't come out on the report. I'm not sure what happened there. But what you'll see is on the first one, supplies general elementary school, that's where we move money for their purchases. Same with the middle school and the high school. We move money from the contingency account into the general supplies and then moved it into the particular lines for each of the schools. We had a teacher during the remote work that made a small software purchase in order to enhance their classroom. That's what number 6 is, Journal 197. And then the remaining larger number, both in volume and dollars, is my normal end of the year closing the accounts, balancing and closing accounts. Questions?
Any questions of school committee? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Rich, second by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none. Molly? Aye. Jason?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Diane?
Aye.
Ann? Bill?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And it's unanimous. Thank you, Sharon.
Welcome.
Seeing no older new business? You do have new business. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm excited that we're entering hybrid on Monday, but I was also excited to see in the weekly report that came out from the state today that we have like 1 or 2 people in our whole district. It seems as though we're rapidly approaching the point where we got to consider moving to the next model, the full in-person model. So I don't know. I know that's not a school committee issue, but I'd like to hear what the timeline is for that and if that's going to get under consideration this week, because I know there's some procedural mechanisms under the new MOU that have to be triggered.
So thanks for asking that. It's a good question. As part of the MOU, we agreed to create a health and safety committee, something like that, right? I don't remember the exact title. That group's gonna meet after the state data is typically released on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. So typically we meet on a Thursday or Friday. We'll look at where the numbers are and where we might be in terms of moving forward. We did not meet today because it's sort of redundant. We didn't need to, but we will be meeting next Thursday, likely, or Friday, and then everyone after that. As the group meets, we're going to weigh state data specific to our 3 towns, plus state data specific to the county. We're also going to look at other trends. One of the goals is to not have yo-yo decision making, like they go in or out, or back and forth quickly, but to look at least 3-week trends. If there's something really dramatic happen, we could pivot on a dime. But if we're moving from one model to another, we'd like to do that in a way that gave parents and staff some notice and time to get ready. As we look forward, we have more flexibility in the elementary school than any of the other buildings in terms of kids and class size and space. And as we go up to the middle and the high school, we have a little less flexibility. I think there's the possibility that guidelines at the state level might change, which might influence what decisions we make. And as sort of Ben alluded to, our range of models and approaches will likely evolve over time. So that gives you like a high level sense of it. After next week, I'll be able to tell you where the group is in terms of its thinking and hopefully where the data is trending. And then we can start having more detailed conversations around what next steps look like.
Anyone else with new business or old business? Any public comment?
Can I, sorry, this is Becky, the nurse from Muddy Brook. I just wanted to find out if Peter has found out, since we start school on Monday, if someone goes home with COVID symptoms, I know Rich Mahoney had brought up he didn't want them coming back until they've had a COVID test. Has that been figured out?
Sorry, that's something that we talked to our attorney about. That's not the guidance, and we didn't follow up on that in terms of having our own policy. that goes beyond that. Probably, Becky, you know better than I do what the specific guidelines are. I have to open up the written materials to speak to it explicitly, but we can't compel people to take tests, but there are a range of steps in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else with public comment?
Hi, may I speak? It's Sherry DeSalle.
Yes, go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, I was not hearing if it were open for public comment.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I just, because when Ben made his presentation for how hybrid is going to look, I didn't hear any requests for public comments. I didn't raise my hand or speak up. But Sherry DeSalle, I live in Tallinn, work in Great Barrington, and have 3 kids amongst the 2 schools, 8th grader, 9th grader, and 12th grader. So I'm covering all the bases this year. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I can't even begin to imagine day to day what everyone's had to deal with in terms of decision making. So my first concern, Ben already touched on, was the amount of time that kids are spending in crew, right? And I completely understand the need to bring them up to speed on the new world. And I think Rich touched on it. I think there's a big difference between 5th graders and 8th graders and their ability to kind of grasp technology and what they need to do, where they need to be. I see Megan, my 8th grader, totally gets it, whereas a 5th grader might still be figuring it out, right? So I think as we move forward, we really need to think about, where their time is better served, especially as they're being prepared to move to the high school. And last night in the family forum, Ben knows this, I asked the question, how far behind are we? As we're asking the kids to set goals, and if curriculum accomplishment is a goal for both teachers and administration, then that's something we also need to continue to be mindful of. And he said, pretty much we're about 3 months behind, which makes sense because we didn't have March, April, May of last year. And now there's, it's been a bit of a slow start. So I feel like we're now a couple more months behind, which makes us 5 months behind. So I would just ask, as a parent of an 8th grader preparing a child to move to the high school, that we try to challenge and reach and, keep them on track for their, I just worry about how far behind we're going to fall here if we keep spending time in crew and not in core, is my kind of theme. Second, I also asked the question, Ben, while we still have the month of October and can be outside potentially, the question came up last night of what our capabilities are at the middle school to be outside. And apparently we don't have a hotspot to be outside with class. And I was somewhat surprised by that because granted, March, April, May, we were all in the fog of war and figuring this out. And then we had the summer to kind of digest the fact that probably by fall, we were not going to be fully in person and that we needed to do everything we could to simulate classrooms, whether it be inside or outside. And yet at the middle school, which is a slick new school, we can't be outside because we don't have Wi-Fi. I'm lost on that one. And then third, and you've already asked the question, fully in person. If numbers are so low, parents are asking, what is it going to take? If not now, then when? Like, how many more weeks and months can go by where we're not attempting to be in school full time, which is obviously the ideal scenario where we can be as normal, quote unquote, as possible. So, sorry, I know there's a lot there, but it's less time in crew. Why aren't we able to be outside at the middle school and on our laptops? And I don't think we have a full understanding of what it's going to take to be back in school full time.
So Sherry, I'll answer one part of it and then I'll turn it over to Peter.
Okay.
Our arrangement was on October 5th, we would go to hybrid. We were not going to bounce from hybrid to in-person like within a day or two. That would make no sense. So we will meet next week as a group, the group that Peter talked about, and there should be some sort of an announcement coming out after that. So I agree with you that we should, as quickly as we safely can, go into in person. And so hopefully we will announce that either next week. My hope would be next week we'd announce a date, but that hasn't been decided yet. Peter, do you want to talk about the hotspot and Wi-Fi?
Yeah, let me talk about a few things. So the first thing with the transition from a hybrid to a face-to-face, I think part of why we're doing the hybrid is to demonstrate that we can do it safely. So having half the kids in the school and showing that we can do that well is an important first step before we have all the kids in the school. So that's one thing. The crew versus core thing, particularly at the upper grade levels in the middle school, is something that we're hearing loud and clear. And we think the investment in crew at the beginning is really going to help kids foundationally. And you'll see over time a shift. And I think that'll be good. The outside thing. So there are a couple of pieces to the outside time. We want to get kids outside to do things outside because that's important, right? And some of that outside work might be doing stuff outside on laptops, but very much of the outside work might just be doing things in groups outside and getting off the laptops. It's my understanding that, well, we don't have Wi-Fi hotspots that go outside. The Wi-Fi does extend fairly close to the physical boundaries of the building, much like you see people outside in the summertime when the Great Barrington Library is closed and they're all in a big circle piggybacking on the Wi-Fi. We can do that. I'll look into, we have a number of hotspots that we're giving to individual families. I'll look into sort of what makes sense additionally to do outside of the school. We have purchased a number of large tents that we're going to set up for to be outside of each building so that kids can have a place to go, even if it's in bad weather, to do some work outside.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's, there are things that we can control and things we can't, and it just seems some of these things we could have somewhat anticipated. And I will add, and I own the fact that we live in Otis on the reservoir, and we've been asked several times. We've done these surveys around connectivity, and we are in that 10 to 15% of people who have to say we don't have reliable internet. But I haven't relied on the district. I've owned that myself. I leave Dylan at home, bring the girls to my office in Great Barrington, and I've solved for that. But for all of the surveys that we completed, there's been absolutely no outreach around connectivity. So I that's not an issue for me. I figured that out myself. But I was surprised to learn that, while we still have a month of beautiful weather, and if we could be outside doing math or doing whatever, that we're not yet prepared to allow the kids that, opportunity to be in nature and learning, their core subjects simultaneously. So anyway, I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you very much for listening to me. Those were just my 3 concerns that have just kind of come to light over the last few weeks. Thank you.
Steve, go ahead.
I just have one more update. Becky, this goes back to your question, and while folks were talking about something else, I looked at the guidance on it. I'm going to read the explicit thing. If somebody decides not to test and is symptomatic, this is the guidance: remain home in self-isolation for 10 days from symptom onset. Then return once 24 hours have passed with no fever and improvement in symptoms without the use of fever-reducing medications. So that's the really most concrete, specific guidance on that.
Right. And that I was aware of. I just knew that a couple of meetings ago, Rich had said he would have preferred to require testing. I knew that's really what the state wanted, that if you have symptoms, you have to stay home for 10 days. If you're a close contact, it's 14.
Right.
So, okay. So we're just going to stay with that.
And when we looked into the legal advice on it, we couldn't find another district that is forcing people to have testing. So we left it at that. So we're just going to follow the state guidance.
Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment?
Yeah, hi, this is Steve and Stacy Schultz. We got a couple of things, if that's okay. Can you guys hear us? Can we get a thumbs up, please? Great. Hey, we've got students in both the middle school and the high school, and we've maintained close connectivity with both of those principals and appreciate all the hard work that's going in. I want to echo Sherry's concerns about crew. I think that at this point, my concern isn't about what's happening today. It's about what happens if we have to go back into a hybrid or a virtual model. I think that definitely, I'm hearing all the right things about reducing the amount of crew, but I would also like to see in the future some kind of plan put in place. I felt like we started this school year a little bit flying by the seat of our pants, and I understand why. So I'm echoing that point by Sherry as well. Another point I'd like to make is about screen time. I think if we're trying to compare the education of our children to too much screen time, as the actual parent of the child, I'd like to actually worry about that. And I would vote for them to get more education out of it, especially at the 8th grade level and other areas where, it's the repetitive nature of the education that's going to create the foundation for them to be competitive in high school. As we look at the other districts around the area where our kids could have gone and look at the other models that they're following, sometimes we're left scratching our head about some of the decisions, but we understand that there's more to the story. So we're trying to be as patient as we can. But if I could just drop anchor on that screen time a bit, I would ask that everybody involved, if you're talking about studies show that screen time is bad, I would say there's probably plenty of studies that show lack of education is bad too. So please don't put us in a position where we have to choose between one or the other, because I think education has to win out. And the expectation is that none of this is long-term anyway, or at least that's the hope. So I think that's part of the approach that we have to take.
And I also want to touch on the screen time. I spoke with Ben at the meeting yesterday and briefly today, and he kept on saying that the reason why synchronous learning is not being offered on the 2 days they're home during a hybrid situation is because of too much screen time. But the asynchronous learning that's being offered is being offered on a screen. So I think that there could be some creative solutions that could be offered where you're bridging possibly a student who's in the classroom already using their laptop to reach someone across the room. They could reach someone who's sitting at home. So these kids are not isolated for 3 days and only having contact with teachers during 2 of those days. And checking in the morning is not enough. I do understand that crew, it's great. It's a wonderful tool. It's something, but it just isn't enough to solidify their education. How do you learn a foreign language if you only speak it 2 days a week? You need to have that repetition, even if it's an audio only component. So you have a video of the classroom going on, the people at home get to see it. Then there's the repetition of being able to practice it when they're actually in school. I feel like there's just been a definitive answer of no synchronous, and there are plenty of options that could be incorporated into that hybrid model.
Yeah, I think the last point, and then we'll be quiet because we've taken up enough of your time, is that I'm struggling to find any kind of published metrics for any of these transitions. I think my wife and I are fortunately in a position where we can remain flexible as the school transitions from remote to hybrid to in-person and potentially back to hybrid or even back to fully remote. But if the metrics remain mystified, then I think most of us are left scratching our head saying, well, who's making the decision and why? And this way we can be a little bit more prepared. I read through the 54-page report that was put together, the plan, and I thought there was a lot of good information in there, but I thought it was absent some of the specifics that I think parents and families deserve, so we can make decisions about employment and babysitting and other things. So with that, I'll let you guys address some of our concerns.
So the driving metric, and I know lots of people would like a concrete formula where it's 30% this and 40% that, and it all adds up to 100%. I see it, and the folks who negotiated the memorandum of understanding see it as complex. We're looking at the state data that comes out every Wednesday at 6, and that's like most obviously represented in a map of the Commonwealth, and each community is indicated as gray, green, yellow, or red. Right now, Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and West Stockbridge are gray, which is good. There's a little bit of stuff that's funky in there because smaller communities in some ways are given more latitude because of one person change could create things, right? But if the sort of the quick answer is if we got into red, then we'd go into a fully remote approach. If we are in gray after we get through these next few weeks, then presumably we would be in school, assuming we can meet all the other requirements around 6-foot spacing, right? And it's a little easier at the elementary school than it is at the middle or high school, and we're working on some of that. Where it gets more complicated is if we land in the yellow, and then what's happening around us, so Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and West Stockbridge. Our staff come from 39 different communities within Massachusetts. So if something was going on, if Pittsfield turned red, that might impact us because a number of students and families and staff come from Pittsfield. So that's where it gets a little more complicated. In looking at our 3 towns, then we also look at Berkshire County. Then we have the capacity, though they count the numbers differently, to look at Columbia County in New York, which borders us. And if something dramatic happened there, that could potentially also impact us. I earlier mentioned sort of trying to avoid making yo-yo decisions, like in and out and back and forth, because I think that would be very disruptive for families. So the hope is that we look at 3-week trends, and if things are trending down, then that's wonderful. If things are trending up, then we watch it really carefully over time. If all of a sudden there's a very high incidence and our community turns red on the map, then we could make a decision very quickly if we needed to. But if we're going the other way from a remote to a hybrid or from a hybrid to a face-to-face, we'd like to give people some significant notice so they could make arrangements around childcare or work. So I hope that gives some clarity. After our first meeting of the group, we'll have some additional clarity, hopefully. We thought long and hard about putting it into a concrete formula, and it didn't seem to work nor afford us enough flexibility. There could be a situation where after we do this for a couple months, we come up with a formula that's very specific, but we're not there yet. That's not for lack of effort. We want to sort of see the full range of variables.
Anyone else?
Peter, would it be okay if I spoke for a minute? This is Christy Farina.
Sure.
So I really want to take a few minutes just to talk about the full spectrum of student experience that I'm hearing about from at the high school, so that the school committee has a sense of different experiences that students are having. I am getting some positive feedback from families about the experience in remote learning so far. I also know that there are some families and students out there who are really struggling with keeping up and figuring out how to use the technology correctly. I know that I didn't speak last week or this week about our hybrid plan, and I do just want to say that my staff are going to work really hard to try to pull off both synchronous learning with kids at home and kids in the classroom. But I do need to just be publicly on record saying that this is a huge lift, even the way that we have created it at the high school. And so I just would like to ask for some patience from the community in regards to the work that the staff are trying to do. So, thanks.
We get next down here. Something going on?
I don't know. Did we lose people?
Seems
I
like
think-
we did.
Sharon went to check, I believe.
Looks like Stockbridge went down. Weather's fine here.
Christy, I just wanted to say thank you. We appreciate your willingness to try synchronous things, and we recognize that there is going to be a learning curve, but we're really impressed with what the high school is putting together.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. You know, like I said, we've gotten good feedback. I also just want the school committee to be aware that there are a lot of families even struggling with what we're trying to do. This is just, it's hard for everyone. And I know people know that. I just, you know, wanted to get that out there on record tonight. Sorry, my lighting is so bad.
The meeting has been adjourned, so
Oh.
people can stay on,
Oh.
but the school committee members should be aware and not be discussing.
Oh, all right.
Okay, I guess goodbye, everyone.
I didn't hear it either. I just checked.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Hey, who's this guy?
This is Bill Field.
Hey, Bill, are you still on? Oh, no. Is anybody from the committee on?
new Robitussin Honey Severe, the real honey you love, plus the powerful cough relief you need. Time to find root through your trash. New Robitussin Honey Severe, strong relief for your